From the very beginning of his ministry, Jesus made choices that surprised many. One of the most significant was his decision to gather 12 disciples. But why exactly 12? What is the meaning behind this number? Today we will explore not only the events leading to the selection of these men, but also the profound symbolism that it carries. Picture the scene. Jesus, with his calm yet powerful presence, climbing a mountain in search of silence and communion with God. He knew that the decision he was about to make would change history forever. Spending an entire night in prayer, he sought not only wisdom but a direct connection with the Father to ensure that every choice aligned with the divine purpose. The following day, the call was made. Peter, Andrew, James, John, Matthew, and other ordinary men were invited to leave their routines and follow Jesus. There were no grand titles or important positions. They were fishermen, tax collectors, zealots, simple people who carried their own flaws and limitations. This choice, however, sparked curiosity. Why didn't Jesus choose more or fewer disciples? Why not 10 or 15? The number 12 held a profound spiritual significance. It echoed the 12 tribes of Israel, symbolizing the restoration of God's people. Just as the 12 tribes were the foundation of the Old Covenant, the 12 disciples would be the pillars of a new covenant, a new story of faith uniting all nations. Their names, personalities, and stories were different, yet they all had one thing in common: a willingness to answer the divine call. Some hesitated at first, but all eventually said yes to a mission they could hardly understand at the time. The symbolism of the number 12 in the Bible. The selection of the 12 disciples was not an isolated event. The number 12 appears repeatedly in the Bible, always carrying a profound spiritual meaning. This recurrence is not random. From the Old Testament, God uses this number to establish order, authority, and divine governance. It is as if the number 12 is God's signature on his plans for humanity. The journey begins with the 12 tribes of Israel, descendants of Jacob's 12 sons. These tribes formed the foundation of God's people, symbolizing the fullness of the covenant between the Creator and his chosen nation. Each tribe played a unique role in shaping the nation of Israel, from the priests of the tribe of Levi to the warriors of the tribe of Judah. Together, they represented the entirety of God's plan for that time. In the New Testament, we see this number highlighted once again. Jesus chooses 12 disciples to inaugurate a new covenant, a new people of God. This choice connects the past to the future, symbolizing the continuity of God's promise. Jesus was showing that the kingdom of God was not a break from what came before, but the fulfillment of something he had been building since the beginning of time. Later, in the book of Revelation, the number 12 reappears as a significant marker. The New Jerusalem, described by John in his vision, has 12 gates, each named after one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and 12 foundations, each named after one of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. It is as if God's plan, past, present, and future, is encapsulated by the number 12. Moreover, the number 12 reflects perfection and completeness. It combines the number 3, often associated with the Trinity, and the number 4, which symbolizes the four corners of the earth, pointing to the union between the divine and the human. When Jesus chose 12 disciples, he was building something far greater than a simple community. He was reaffirming God's sovereignty and purpose across all creation. The process of choosing the disciples. Jesus knew that selecting the 12 disciples would be one of the most significant moments of his ministry. These men would not just be followers, but the pillars of a new covenant, entrusted with spreading the gospel to the world. Before making this decision, Jesus climbed a mountain and spent the entire night in prayer. Luke chapter 6, verse 12. This detail, though often overlooked, reveals something crucial: the importance of communion with God before making major decisions. The night of prayer demonstrates the depth of the relationship between Jesus and the Father. There, in the silence of the mountain, far from the distractions of the world, Jesus sought divine wisdom to discern who should be part of this special group. He didn't choose men based on their human abilities, but on their hearts and God's purpose for each of them. The next day, Jesus began calling them one by one. The invitation was simple yet powerful. "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men," Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. Some, like Peter and Andrew, immediately left their fishing nets. Matthew, the tax collector, abandoned his collection table. They didn't fully know where they were going, but they trusted Jesus' authority and call. It's fascinating to see that the disciples were ordinary men with simple professions and diverse personalities. Peter, impulsive and passionate; John, introspective and loving; Matthew, a strategist; and Simon, the zealot, fervent in his fight for political freedom. Each of them had flaws, but they all shared one thing: a willingness to follow Jesus and learn from him. The role of the disciples in Jesus' ministry. The 12 disciples were not just followers of Jesus, but active participants in his ministry. Each step they took alongside the Master was an opportunity for learning, transformation, and preparation for the mission awaiting them after the resurrection. But what exactly was the role of these men during their time with Jesus? First, the disciples were eyewitnesses to the miracles and teachings of Jesus. They saw with their own eyes the multiplication of loaves and fishes, the healing of the blind and paralyzed, and even the raising of the dead. These events were not mere demonstrations of power, but profound lessons about the kingdom of God and divine compassion. Each miracle strengthened their faith and prepared them for the day they would proclaim these truths to the world. Additionally, the disciples were personally trained by Jesus. He taught them through parables, such as the parable of the sower found in Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 to 8. After sharing these stories with the crowds, he would explain the deeper meaning only to the disciples, ensuring they understood what lay beneath the surface. This personal training equipped them to lead the nascent church. A central aspect of their role was accompanying Jesus in key moments of his mission. They were with him on the Mount of Olives during his anguish, Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 to 46, and witnessed the power of his prayer to the Father. Though they often didn't fully understand what was happening, their experiences alongside Jesus shaped them as leaders. Finally, the disciples represented the spiritual restoration of the 12 tribes of Israel. While God's people had been divided throughout history, Jesus was uniting a new people through his covenant. The 12 disciples would be the foundation of this new movement, spreading the message of salvation to both Jews and Gentiles. The lasting impact of the 12 disciples. The selection of the 12 disciples resonates through the centuries, leaving a lasting impact that continues to shape Christian faith today. These ordinary men, called to an extraordinary mission, became the foundation of the church and the spread of the gospel worldwide. After Jesus' resurrection, the disciples received the Great Commission: "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." Matthew chapter 28, verse 19. This command, given directly by the Master, became the starting point of a global movement. Men like Peter and Paul, despite facing persecutions and challenges, traveled great distances to proclaim the message of God's kingdom. Their efforts laid the groundwork for Christianity as we know it today. The number 12 remains a symbol of perfection and unity in God's plan. Just as the 12 tribes of Israel represented God's chosen people, in the Old Covenant, the 12 disciples symbolize the new covenant between God and all humanity. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 14, we read that the foundations of the New Jerusalem bear the names of the 12 apostles, reaffirming their eternal significance in God's plan. But the impact of this choice goes beyond historical achievements. Each disciple represents the possibility of transformation. Peter, who denied Jesus, became the rock on which the church was built. John, known for his love, wrote the Gospel bearing his name and the book of Revelation. These men show us that God can use anyone willing to answer his call. The story of the 12 disciples is not just a record of the past. It challenges us to reflect on our own role in God's plan. Just as Jesus chose simple and imperfect men to change the world, he also calls us to participate in his mission today. Each disciple had flaws, but their willingness to follow Jesus made them powerful instruments in God's hands. This lesson reminds us that we don't need to be perfect to be used by him. What matters is having a heart willing to obey and trust. Have you ever wondered how God can use your life? You may see yourself as ordinary, but that's exactly what Jesus sought in his disciples. He continues to call us, as he did Peter, John, and Matthew, to say yes to his plan. May we remain attentive to God's voice, ready to respond, "Here I am, Lord." After all, he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.